Strong brands aren't built on hype, they're built on trust, consistency, and actually delivering on what you promise. Today's guest is proof of that. Joining us is Omar Atia, the founder of Zero Carb Lyfe, a fast-growing nutrition brand that sold over 460,000 products and served more than 54,000 customers, with nearly half of them coming back again and again. Omar made the leap from consulting to hands-on entrepreneurship, and what sets him apart is that he owns the manufacturing, prioritizes real ingredient transparency, and finds ways to lower costs without compromising the quality. From scaling with institutional backing to expanding into retail and international markets, Omar's building a brand that's growing strongly, but doing it in a way that actually earns the customer loyalty in an industry that often struggles with trust. Omar, welcome to the show. Omar, welcome to the show. To kick things off, can you share a little bit about your background and what you're building with Zero Carb Lyfe?
I'm CEO and founder of Zero Carb Lyfe. I've spent about 13, 14 years in big food CPG companies in the US. Before I was a consultant for about 6 years, and then I started up Zero Carb Lyfe in 2020. So my background is on the R&D, operations, and to some extent market research side of all those big CPG companies. Took all that experience to starting up Zero Carb Lyfe.
So what ultimately pushed you to creating your own brand?
Honestly, I've been entrepreneurial since I was probably 7 years old, having always a side hustle along with school, and then along with being a full-time employee of CPG companies. When I became a consultant, I started to see small and mid-sized companies on the inside and understand what was done well and what wasn't done very well, and also got to experience marketing and branding as part of that. And so was very excited about starting up my own company, and because I was also consulting with some startups, some of it free of charge just to get equity, and realized that there's a lot of opportunity in the startup space, especially for healthy food, given what I wanted to do of a mission.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. I was actually in CPG as well for nutritional companies like protein bars. It's so interesting to understand consumer behavior, and I want to talk about ingredient transparency because I know that's a core part of your brand. I think that's something that a lot of our listeners will really relate to. I see here you have a 42% repeat purchase rate, which is incredible. And from your perspective, what do you think most brands are getting wrong when it comes to building that real customer loyalty?
It's two things. One, obviously, is you have to have a good product. It doesn't have to be good for everyone, by the way. Like, it should be very tasty, but not everyone experiences products the same. So don't try to make it the same thing for everyone. Find out who is the real audience you want to make it for. So for us, it's pizza lovers in general, and then it's specifically people who actually do care at least a little bit about their health. So it can be for 12-year-olds eating pizza. It's more people who are in their 20s now realizing what the value of macros are. People that are later in their life and building a family, wanting to bring good things to their family in terms of food. So it's that understanding of who your audience is, and then really listening to your audience. So I think what brands sometimes get wrong is they don't know how to differentiate the signal from the noise. Because there's always, you can take everything you get as signal, but you really have to do a good job of differentiating what's real signal that you can then chase versus noise. Because what a startup is about isn't about getting it right from the first time. If you're going into business thinking you're going to get it right from the first time, you're going to be devastated.
Yeah.
The whole point of startup is iterating.
Right.
So you should be ready to iterate, but what you should be ready to iterate based on is what the market tells you, not what your ego tells you.
Right. Yeah, those are some really great points. It's some really great advice. Like you said, differentiating the signal from the noise, especially working in digital marketing and like the online space, there can be a lot of feedback that you can get, but it's so important, like you said, to focus on that target consumer and like who you're actually looking to appeal to. It can be overwhelming to get a lot of feedback from a lot of people. So
Absolutely.
really important to make sure that you're getting the right feedback from your target audience and to act on that too. So you've made the move to owning your own manufacturing facility, and that's not something a lot of founders do. How has that decision really impacted your ability to think of things like quality control, pricing, and then also that overall brand trust?
So I would not recommend other founders, unless they have manufacturing background, to do it. I just happen to be blessed that I was in R&D and operations at those big companies. And one of my roles for about 3 years was to actually turn around factories and reduce cost out of them, make them run better, et cetera. So I saw that opportunity with the contract manufacturer we had. And just to be clear, so everyone who's listening understands, it's not Zero Carb Lyfe that owns directly the manufacturing. It's a common partnership ownership, which I'm one of them. And so that allows us to have full control in a cost-plus relationship. So it's almost similar as being a business unit, but it's a separate profit center for people who understand what that means. So it allows a little bit of independence of the factory to still be sort of no conflict of interest to make sure that quality control is right by the client, which is Zero Carb Life. But what led us to that is, of course, having enough scale that you now know you need a lot more line time, because when you're with a contract manufacturer, unless you're really big, you really are getting in line for when you're a small brand. And so that becomes difficult when you're scaling and you're going into Target like we are, and then they might scale further, and then other retailers are interested. You have to be ready, and you have to be ready not in 7 months. You have to be ready sometimes in 2 or 3 months. And it's the same thing for us because we're going into different channels. So we have retail and we also have food service. So we have an 800 restaurant pizza chain, for instance, that contacted us. They want to get the product in by end of summer. So that's that's a magnitude of, a 4x, 5x of production. And that's not possible to just go to a contract manufacturer and say, hey, just do this for us. And they drop, start to increase labor, et cetera, unless they have skin in the game. And so that's what we wanted. It also allowed, of course, that there's more control over cost, as I have full visibility to it. And the board of Zero Carb Life has full visibility to it because I do, and because we have a cost plus relationship with the factory. It also allows us to do R&D a lot more nimbly, or a lot more, effectively, instead of it just being kitchen level. We have, for instance, 8 more products that are developed at the sort of upstream R&D. But to get it commercialized, you really have to have a good read on what is it like quality-wise and cost-wise at scale. When you're making at the manufacturing level, and we couldn't really do that easily. You can't go to a contract manufacturer and say, hey, I'm thinking about launching this in 2.5 years. You won't get business out of it, but give me line time to test it. That's not really feasible. But when you have your own facility, you can do that more often.
A lot of pros to working closely with a manufacturing facility, but yeah, as you addressed at the very beginning, it seems like it's not the easiest for every founder to kind of get involved with and to do. It's great that you do have the ability to kind of go oversee the control and like look into things like pricing, and I do feel like that impacts your overall brand trust, because the consumer then does know that you're a part of the whole process, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Has that feedback come up? Like, do you think that impacts like how people view the brand if they know that you're a part of like all of the manufacturing and the whole process?
So we've just started to hype that, over the last month and a half. So, but we definitely know that there's been positive feedback from the retailers when they hear about it, because it's much reassuring for them that, we can scale when needed. Of course, customers like that we take their feedback and very quickly talk about ingredients, make it very clear on the label. We can potentially test other ingredients, other oils, et cetera. So that is a value to the customer, especially those that care about ingredients and about the sourcing. We have direct visibility of sourcing. For instance, we got our factory halal certified as soon as we took control, because we know that matters too for cleanliness of product, as well as to a specific audience in the Northeast. And I'm Muslim myself, so it kind of helps communicate to my network as well. So you can't really do that if it's a contract manufacturer. But I do want to caution, because I'm talking about all the pros. There's a lot of cons to owning a whole other liability, right? You have an asset base, you have depreciation, you have personnel. You're now dealing with the hiring of operators, so you should have a really good CEO or a really good director of that part of the business or that separate business in order for it to be a success. Otherwise, you're just putting yourself down a rabbit hole that you're not ready for.
Yeah, that's a really great point. One thing you just touched upon was that ingredient transparency. And I think that's really something that's always been important, but more and more we're seeing it show up in the marketing of food products. We're seeing people really taking time to consciously view the label, to see what is actually in the ingredients that they're consuming. And it's a very strong core part of your brand. But how do you make that a strong competitive advantage instead of just maybe another marketing message? Like, what are some ways that you uniquely go about it to get that out there to your audience?
So we try to make sure our audience knows that the specific uniqueness of our product is actually, our patent is based on the fact that we don't have binders or additives. So generally, any other product, any other company, when they bind protein, in order to bind protein, you have to have some kind of binder. And usually the binder is not protein, because that's the whole reason you need a binder, is because it doesn't bind well. But we've figured out a way to use time and temperature to bind the protein, which allows our crust to be just 4 ingredients that you can actually pronounce and that you know exactly what they are. Chicken, salt, spices, and olive oil. And so when people know that, and then that's the same kind of mindset we follow with our chips as well. For instance, the food coloring in our lava crisp, which is supposed to be the Takis of, the Takis equivalent of our chips, is beet, is beet color. It's so like beet powder. So there's, with creativity, with innovation, and with just a little more work and maybe a tad more cost, obviously, you really can get clean ingredients, and you can get less ingredients with innovation. And that's what we've tried to make sure our audience and our followers know, as well as to really challenge other food companies that are our competitors. We like our competitors to grow the category, candidly. We're not looking at it as like, oh, if someone takes market share, that's bad for us, because we want a lot more people to consume healthy products. And it can only happen if people are challenged and companies are challenged to make those products tasty and clean. And there's like thinking that those are at odds with each other. It's not easy. It is complex, but it's not unattainable. And so that's what we're trying to prove with our thesis, that you can attain indulgence, healthy, clean, all in one, and grow a business doing it.
Yeah, that's great. You brought up a lot of interesting points. I think, even just looking at a label for some people, if they can't pronounce or they don't understand what they're reading, then they're not, some of them won't consume it. When you work in CPG marketing, especially in the nutrition field, there's a lot of fillers or additives that get added to these products. For the consumer, it can be a little confusing because you initially go into consumer products sometimes because, like you said, the macros are great. So you're like, okay, this is good. It'll, I can get my protein, my fat, my carb content from this product. It sounds great. But then when you look at the ingredients, a lot of times you don't really know what those ingredients are that's in there. There may be hidden things that you weren't super enthusiastic to have. And I think, having fewer ingredients makes things a lot easier for your audience to understand what they're consuming. And also it's a lot more appealing to the customer too when you have that transparency. So as you're continuing to expand into retail, international markets, how are you maintaining the same level of quality and also that connection piece with your customers as well?
That's a great question. It is definitely a challenge. We were just actually this morning talking about our NPS score and what we're going to do to activate more reaching out to those people that are huge promoters on our NPS score, for example. And it really is about understanding your channels, where you're succeeding, doubling down on where you're succeeding. For us, our growth has meant that we are able to understand our customer a little bit better than the norm just because we started out in direct to consumer. So we're able to sort of correlate the amount of data we have on direct to consumer, the number of surveys we've done, the amount of understanding we've had on consumer feedback on our product has helped us correlate. When we see just a lot less from retail, for instance, comments, we can correlate those to, hey, this is that same group that said these things in D2C. So we don't only have an N of 14 or an N of 20, we actually have an N of 300, 400, because you can sort of bring them together and draw a conclusion. So that allows us to stay connected to the customer voice and make iterations that are better for that customer. Our growth, we are taking it with a very disciplined approach. So for instance, you'll notice we're in Target and only in Target in retail. And that's not because we can't sell to anyone else. We actually have interest from 4 additional retailers that are big retailers. But there's so many stories, I'm not sure if you've had any on your podcast, of people growing their brand, getting excited about going into Walmart or Costco, and then it really just kills their brand. And it's because you really have to have the capital behind promoting and really selling and trialing and demoing products when you put them into big retailers. And you have to have the velocity. If you don't have the velocity, you'll be pulled. And now you're stuck with product that's in their warehouses, or you're stuck with a huge sort of leveling up of your organization capital-wise that you now don't have business for. Doing it with a disciplined approach, studying what actually is working, what's connecting with our customers, what they're loving about our product, doubling down on what works, and growing that, and then scaling that into other retailers is the way we're looking at it in retail. And that's how we did it in direct to consumer, very disciplined, and now we're able to scale it this year. Our quarter over quarter growth, Q1 was 50% more sales than Q4. Q2 is on track to be another 45 to 50% more than Q1. Wow. And that's because we waited on sort of putting our feet on the gas until we had a very disciplined understanding of our e-commerce customer. In food service, it's similar. We've started with a few big chain restaurants that are medium-sized chain, and now we have the 800 restaurant chain example that's coming to us, and we feel comfortable to sell to them and to be able to support it well. So it's really about being patient and disciplined, while at the same time delivering to your investors what you need. You do have to have, and you have to have, hockey stick growth, but it's important to not chase the hockey stick growth too early because it can kill you.
I like how you brought up, having the disciplined approach. I think oftentimes a lot of entrepreneurs too get really excited about the opportunity being featured in Costco. Then there is so much that comes with it that you could ultimately end up sacrificing what you worked so hard to create, which was the quality product, because you're racing to get it on the shelves, or you're maybe taking an investor that now you kind of lost a little bit of equity in your company, so you don't have as much control as you used to. So I really like that you brought that up, and how you mentioned too, making sure that you're referring back to the quality that is why you started the company to begin with, and scaling in that way. Yeah. So as we wrap up this episode, there are a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to this show, and especially those that are maybe building a product-based business. What is one piece of advice that you wish you had earlier on when you decided to start this company?
I don't know if I can hone it down to one, but I'll tell you the ones. So one for sure is just brace yourself,
Okay.
because no matter how strong of a leader you are, no matter how amazing, no matter how spot on the problem you're solving is, no matter how amazing your product is, just brace yourself for the challenges that are coming your way, because runway gets tight very quick. If you're not disciplined, if you're not watching your blind spots, if you're not complimenting yourself with people that complement your weaknesses as a leader, if you're not aware that the solution you have, even though it seems amazing, is actually not the solution you're going to end up with, and it's probably 7 iterations down at least. If you're not ready for all of that, it's going to be a really tough ride, and you're going to cry a lot. But if you know that that's the journey, you're going to be really excited throughout the journey. You're going to take everything that seems like a hit as not a hit. It's just like, oh, this is the growth. It's like one of my children who's wanting to be taller. As soon as he hears, like, he has pain in his legs, as soon as I say growing pains, he's like excited because I'm getting taller. So it's really the same concept, that if you are told before you start, look, there's going to be these pains, but that's how you're going to grow, and you can't grow without them. You literally can't. It's just a rite of passage, and it's not a few. It's quite many. If I had that advice, I think it would have braced myself a little bit more, especially early on. Now everything that comes, it's like, this is nothing.
Right.
So, because you're used to it. And then the light at the end of the tunnel sometimes is a little further out than you think, but it does count, as long as you stay persistent and patient.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think this conversation will be really helpful for a lot of entrepreneurs listening to our show, especially those in the CPG space that maybe learned a thing or two about what it actually takes to build your own business and then to scale. So what you're doing with Zero Carb Lyfe is awesome, and I really appreciate your time today on the show, and I look forward to sharing this with everyone.
Appreciate it, Bex.
This was such a refreshing conversation, especially in a space that it's really easy to get caught up in maybe trends instead of substance. What really stands out is the focus on building a brand from the inside out, owning the operations, staying transparent, and letting customer loyalty be the real measure of success. For anyone listening who's maybe building a product-based business themselves, there's a huge lesson in here. Growth is great, but retention is everything. If you found value in this episode, please feel free to share it with someone who's building a brand and needs a reminder that trust is the ultimate growth strategy. We'll see you all in the next week's episode. Until next time, keep showing up, keep creating, and keep building your story.